We have a signal now for when I'm needed. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call, it's a warning. Nobody understands me. I'm alone in this world, and that's why I must fight for it. Because that's right, everybody. Today we are talking about The Batman. The Batman starring Robert Pattinson, our newest take on the Caped Crusader, DC's next attempt at having as good canon standard Batman that they can call upon when justice is needed. Did he succeed in this epic request, or did he fail? I have to say, I have very mixed emotions about this film. And overall, I will say that I think it is more wasted potential than it is necessarily anything that fresh or good or new. But first, let me start at the beginning. So really the main plot of this movie is Batman trying to stop the Riddler. He needs help from, some villains, people like the Penguin, maybe some questionable people like Catwoman, until he can see why the mayor was killed and who the Riddler is and why he does what he does. So really, I'm going to start with the good of this movie before anything else, because there was some cool aspects. The cinematography was pretty on point. There was many times where it was kind of filmed as if like a horror movie or a noir film, and it had cool camera cuts and angles that made it nice to look at the entire time. And that definitely I had to give it props for. And I gotta say, for the first, because this movie has like three distinct parts to it, like the first part being where Batman is kind of discovering the Riddler. He's like, talking to the Penguin. That's more of focusing on establishing all that. The second part is more of kind of detective work. And then the third part is where it just kind of becomes your standard, action-y type film with comic books. I gotta say, the first third of it, I was really pretty on board. I thought the way that it started was pretty cool. The Riddler definitely seemed like he was unhinged, and the way that he was just kind of killing people seemed more like gratuitous and more violent than your average comic book movie. Whereas, it wasn't like some silly trap or anything that the mayor got set into. The Riddler just broke into his house and like beat him to death, which was pretty cool. And them establishing everything, but it only lasted so long. I liked that it was already kind of an established Batman, where he was, the Joker's posse was already around. There was the guys with all the groups and everything were already there. Obviously, the Penguin was already established as a gangster, a mafioso. It was nice not to just have another origin film for a character that's already been redone, like the third time in the past 10 years. So that was nice. And that's about it where I'm going to talk about all the good things. Y'all know me, I like to complain, so I'm gonna get right to that now. Alright, so my first issue kind of with the movie is its main character and how exactly he was portrayed. Now I understand the reasoning was that it's his first 2 years or so of being Batman, so he's not exactly gonna be, the Dark Knight that we're all used to, but he doesn't even act like a vigilante, I would say. He just acts, he's like a misunderstood, edgy teenager, and he just is so awkward, which I'm sure they were trying to go for, as showing that like Bruce Wayne is kind of detached from people and things like that. But I knew way too many people like this in school for me to look at it and think it's like heroic the way or anything that he's doing. He has this kind of thing that he does. He's doing it right here, where he's always just kind of like looking down and looking up at you. And I got another picture, boom, right here. That's what he does. Every time he's talking, it's just kind of this like awkward. He's staring at the floor, but still kind of looking at you. The way he acted reminded me more of like an angsty teenager than it did somebody, because I'm not sure exactly how old he's supposed to be. It's like in his 20s or something, but he acts too awkward. He acts too edgy and kind of the music that they play for him all the time goes right along with that, because the music, it's always edgy, teen emo rock and stuff like that. So right off the bat, although I can kind of get that he's more awkward and detached because it's a Batman thing, it's so much to the point where it just felt like a real world awkward kid walking around pretending he didn't have the essence of a vigilante. Even in his early years, I feel like he should have some kind of competence. A lot of the things that Batman did seemed more so beginner. Like, he needs to talk to the Penguin, so he literally goes to the Penguin's door, knocks on the front door, and he's like, I want to talk to the Penguin. Then the dude tells him to fuck off, and then he just starts a brawl and beats up everybody in the room. And it's one of those things. How long did it take Batman to realize, oh, maybe if I'm sneaky, then I won't have to fight? Because the movie started with him hiding in the shadows, but so many of his confrontations that he gets into are started because he's out in the open, and he's just going out in broad daylight and just starting fist fights in the middle of clubs. But then anytime it's convenient, when he's in a tunnel or when he's in the subway or something, or in the beginning intro, he is in the shadows. And I understand that you need your action scenes and such, but I feel like even within the first 2 years, it is within the character of Batman to be sneaky. He is supposed to be trained by assassins and such. They didn't really bring up anything like that in this movie. You kind of get the feeling that he really was just an edgelord that was rich, and then he just threw on a costume and started fighting people. He doesn't try to avoid, he just walks directly into gunfire because he has bulletproof armor. And it's all these things where it's like, Batman has all of that stuff, but it's supposed to be a fallback for when his natural ability can't come through. And it's that natural ability, I'm like, Batman already knew Kung Fu going into it and stuff. He already knew how to be an assassin. So why would he therefore go and knock on the Penguin's front door to ask if he can play? There were certain things like that that just kind of took me out of the believability of Batman, and really the essence of Batman, of him being smart or him being intimidating. I'm not really intimidated by some tall guy. He's tall, but maybe it's me, I feel like he looked so lanky. You compare him to, like, the Ben Affleck who's wearing like the muscle suit and shit. Besides that, it's like, even him being smart, he did solve the Riddler's riddles pretty quickly a lot of the time, but he just seemed more like a smart ass than a smart person. And it just goes back to that whole him being like an edgy teen, where he just has to be a smart ass and say something back. He always has to have the last word. Anybody he talks to, they're like, man, you're a real pain in the ass. And Batman's just looking down at them and he's like, you're a pain in the ass. It almost comes off as childish on so many different occasions, where it's not even, this is the first 2 years. This is not even like a grown man Batman. This has to be like an 18-year-old or a younger version of Batman, which I don't think it's supposed to be. Now, without talking too much about, Batman in particular or what made him feel like Batman, another thing about this movie was the pacing was very interesting. It felt very fast-paced, but I'm sure you've heard this before. It felt like watching an Arkham game. And I don't know when it became the standard for movies to think like, oh, people like video games, let's make a video game movie. The cutscenes is everything that I skip in a video game. The cutscenes aren't what I care about. I want to play the game. So imagine going and watching a 3-hour-long cutscene of a game that you can't play, and the person who is playing sucks at the game. And the way they do everything, it's just like kind of the in-between of the action scenes was very brief. The in-between of all the stuff that wasn't like Riddler and all that was just so brief that it was just, from one scene to another. And then he just shows up and it's like, boom, fight scene. It felt so choreographed, and none of it felt that natural, because it was just like, yeah, this is, the next cutscene because it was supposed to be. Everybody felt a little too just like normal. A lot of the characters in this movie, most of the characters weren't really developed. You know, you look at the Batman, and on top of the whole point of Batman just feeling like a normal teenager, just like an edgelord, everybody in the movie just felt so toned down to the point where, you know, I got the Penguin right here pulled up, played by Colin Farrell, and if you didn't tell me specifically that he was the Penguin, there's nothing that would lead me to believe it on my own. Look at what are the defining characteristics of the Penguin? He's got the monocle, he's got the top hat, he looks like a bird, you know, he's got the long nose, but it feels like so much of the stuff in this movie it's toned down so much that it's just like figurative kind of stuff. It's like, oh, what makes him the Penguin? Well, you know, he's got a crooked nose and flat foot politics. He's known as the Penguin. But why? He doesn't do anything bird-like. He doesn't he's just Colin Farrell in a fat suit. And it's like like the Penguin as one of the characters isn't a bad one. His portrayal was okay, but it really wasn't. You could have taken this Penguin and put him in any other movie and he would have been just as good. It's not like this is the Penguin or anything. He's just some guy that they're giving the mantle of the Penguin. And I had that same issue with kind of Commissioner Gordon here. Commissioner Gordon never felt more ordinary than he does in this movie. So if Robert Pattinson is just like an edgy teenager, Gordon is like the police officer that just kind of felt bad for him, so he like took him under his wing, and he like, you know, like hits him on the back of the head when he screws up, but he's like, you know, you're not really my kid, but I'm still gonna kind of take care of you. And he didn't feel like a police chief. He didn't feel, you know, when my quintessential Batman movie is The Dark Knight. And a lot of people compare this to The Dark Knight. So, with everyone comparing it to The Dark Knight, let's compare this Commissioner Gordon to the Commissioner Gordon, Ethan Hawke's Commissioner Gordon. It's a complete difference. That Gordon felt like it was a much more established thing, whereas this Gordon, so much of it, they're just like, you should already know. You should already know he's Commissioner Gordon. But it's like, yeah, but what is he outside of that? What is he outside of the scenes that we have with him? He's just, everybody's reduced to just one character trait. Commissioner Gordon, he's just a grumpy old dad, and that's all he is throughout the movie. You look at Batman, and what is he throughout the whole movie? He's just an edgelord throughout the whole movie. That's his one trait. And it just becomes this thing where it's, if this is supposed to be, you know, the new Batman, and it's supposed to be up to the standard of The Dark Knight, then where's the development in characters? Because the Dark Knight trilogy developed like Commissioner Gordon. They developed Batman and Bruce Wayne. Whereas this movie, so much of it, it was like, yeah, you already know. You've already seen it, so we're not going to try. And it's, I understand, you know, the Batman story is already known and everything, but you could still make us care about the character. I shouldn't care about Robert Pattinson as Batman simply because he's playing Batman. And, you know, so I talked about the Penguin, who's not necessarily the main villain. He's more of like a middleman in the movie that the Batman just goes to him frequently to ask him for help every time he's unable to solve these riddles. Because I gotta say, everyone says how this is like such a noir detective film. You know, he's going and he's investigating and he's doing a real detective case. But then time and time again throughout this movie, this is a 3-hour movie. And repeatedly, it's like, yeah, he'll know the simple like childhood riddles that like anybody would know. But then anything that matters, Batman doesn't save anybody from the Riddler in this movie. The Riddler wins in every way possible, and they don't even develop him that well. So it's like they show him, you know, like this is from the beginning scene when he kills the mayor and he wears the mask, and they show that he's just super crazy. Just really, and that's his one character trait. He's just crazy. And everything he does, he just acts over the top. Crazy, silly, stupid. And once again, it's like such a far deviation from what you would know as the Riddler that it's like if you put him in a completely different movie that had nothing to do with Batman, I wouldn't fucking be able to tell. And if you didn't tell me that he was the Riddler, I wouldn't be able to know because he just seems like any ordinary serial killer, which I understand they may have been going for, but then it becomes this whole thing of like, what scale is this Batman at? Because this Robert Pattinson Batman is as street level as it gets. And most of this movie is about the Batman pursuing the Riddler. And in all that time, they never take a chance to just like focus on the Riddler a little bit or to develop him as a character or show his personality outside of him just being like over the top crazy, which starts to become boring after a little bit because it's, what am I supposed to care about? He's literally like just sitting there jumping off the walls, screaming at the top of his lungs for every scene that he's in. So it's like, so he's that crazy unhinged to where he like is barely functional and he's like still beating the world's greatest detective because the Batman truly loses in this movie. The entire movie is like them trying to figure out who the Riddler is, trying to figure out his plan. And then in the very end, they find out who he is. And then his plan comes to fruition anyways. So then you have this character that hasn't even been developed throughout the movie. All they've shown is it's like, yeah, he's a killer. Yeah, he's fucked up. And at the end of the movie, the Riddler literally floods all of Gotham. He destroys a dam, floods everything. So he floods the entire city, and then it's just up to, and then not only does he flood the city, but then he goes and tries like this whole other political assassination where he has, because I'm sure this has all been said, this dude gave to me clear like QAnon incel vibes where he was just some crazy conspiracist after the shadow government, which like ended up being real or whatever. And then he goes on YouTube and he gets a bunch of followers. And I'm not sure if it was on purpose, but the whole part where they were like storming the Capitol, it just felt like they were so trying to like give off that like the real life storming of the Capitol vibes. And it was just to the point where they kept trying to make it so realistic to where it's like, I don't go to a superhero movie to see the most realistic outcome. I don't watch a guy dress up as a bat and punch people in the face because I want to know like how it would go in real life. That's the whole point of comic books, is it's supposed to be creative and fun and like an escape from the stupid, boring reality, mundaneness of real life. So Batman completely failed to solve the case that we had been following him with this entire movie. And then it floods the whole city, that was some Avengers level like death, right? There, like the entire city got flooded. A lot of people died. And when the Avengers had that, like the first Avengers, the whole city was destroyed, they got a lot of shit for it. And they were like, oh, what, you're superheroes and you're not even saving the city? Batman was the direct cause of this city being flooded. He wasn't smart enough to prevent it. And then once it was flooded, he literally, like this 3-hour movie of him failing to solve all these riddles and clues just for him to save one person at the end. One person at the end. And it really makes me wonder, like, I think the length of this movie might have been its biggest weakness, because I could probably forgive a lot of the stuff that I'm complaining about if it wasn't so long. 3 hours is ridiculous. And if you're not going to take those 3 hours, you're not going to spend the time to like develop the characters and like build the world and everything, then just shorten the movie. This easily could have been a 2-hour movie, maybe an hour and 45 minutes, if they had just edited it down properly and if they were just smart about their stuff, because a lot of it still feels kind of rushed. And the stuff that feels kind of rushed is almost the best stuff, because the things that they take their time with is everything that makes the movie boring. It's everything that leads to Batman failing. And then you end up with this sense of like unsatisfaction because nothing was accomplished. And then, of course, at the end of the movie, they set up for a sequel. And it brought up this whole thing for me of where exactly does this movie fit in the DCCU? Because this Batman, in no way, shape, or form, even if you give him another 20 years, could stand toe to toe with the Justice League. Any of them. He's not smart enough. He's not physically capable enough. So is it going to be where they have the Robert Pattinson Batman and then they find a new Batman to be in the Justice League? Because if it's no longer Ben Affleck, they currently just don't have a Batman. So for, like, the DC cinematic universe is so messed up right now. For like the past 10 plus years, they've been trying and failing to copy the Avengers formula. And then the Snyder Cut was like the closest thing we got to a good version of it, or like Suicide Squad. And then before they even have like the first movies out for any of these guys, they're already copying Marvel, because Marvel's got the multiverse going on. So now, whoa, DC's gonna have their whole multiverse going, because in the Flash movie, that's how they're gonna develop everything with the multiverse. So how many Batmans are we gonna have? And which one's going to be in the Justice League? And then is he going to leave before the next Justice League? And like every way I try to think about it, this movie just felt unnecessary. Like we didn't really need a new Batman. I don't see this one being part of the Justice League. I don't see how he could be. So if they're just going to get a new one anyways, what was the point of this movie? I literally thought that I was just watching another one of the Christian Bale Batman movies, because it was just so much of stuff that you've already seen. And then the stuff that they brought to the table that was new was very underwhelming. Zoe Kravitz, she did a fine job as Catwoman. They show that she, was pretty competent on her own. Her back and forth with Batman, I didn't say it earlier, but that was like pretty decent, some of their interactions. But the two main characters given, like pretty good performances doesn't justify a whole new franchise or a 3-hour movie. Because she'll clearly be back. They're setting up for a whole new Joker. They got a whole, So how far is this going to go? And what is the Joker going to be? Just some guy who likes to have a giggle every now and again? I don't understand it. What's the direction and what's the point? Another thing that I'm remembering now that I look at Selina Kyle here is there was several scenes where Batman would just, like, when he first meets her, he follows her home and then he just watches her undress with binoculars. And they have a lot of these close-up scenes in the movie where it'll just be like his eyes, and I swear every time his eyes are just swollen with tears and they're just red and puffy. So he's like stalking this woman, watching her undress, and he's just crying while he does it. And this is our hero, guys. This is our hero, guys. In Edgelord. Do I think this movie's worth the money? Nope. You're better off streaming it in 40 whatever days when it comes out on streaming. Or you could watch the trailer, because the trailer shows the whole movie without all the fluff. So that might be a better investment too, because 3 hours is a long time. You could use that 3 hours to do different things. Things such as, finding a local mystery to solve to help your city, enacting revenge on the criminals that gave you such a hard life. Maybe even finding that girl that you just, have such a good feeling about, and maybe starting a relationship with her. All things Batman failed to do in his own movie. Take it easy, guys.